Today, we're going to talk about why you can't just walk away from a narcissist, and looking in particular at intermittent reinforcement and how therapy can help. You knew something was wrong, you've probably known it for a long time, but every time you try to leave or pull back, something shifted in them. They were kind again. They were that person that you remember meeting and falling in love with. They gave you attention, so you stayed. And then, maybe months or years later, you're sitting there asking yourself, why? Why did I stay? Why couldn't I just walk away? Why do I keep going back? What is wrong with me? And I want to answer that question today because it isn't about weakness and it isn't about stupidity, or it's not even a character flaw. Part of the answer is the intermittent reinforcement. This affects your brain, and then in explaining that, hopefully everything will make a little bit more sense for you. So first off, what is intermittent reinforcement? Well, it sounds really clinical, but actually it's quite a simple concept. It's what happens when reward comes unpredictably. So think about a slot machine. You don't win every time. In fact, you lose most of the time, but occasionally you do win, and there's always the hope that you might win. And because you never know when that win is coming, you keep going, you keep putting your money in, and it's hard to walk away because you think the next one I put in might be the one that wins. And that unpredictability is what keeps you hooked. And that's the exact same mechanism that happens with a narcissistic relationship. Because not every day is bad. Some days, weeks, everything feels warm and close and loving and everything you've ever wanted. You feel seen, you feel chosen. But then, out of nowhere, it shifts back again. That coldness returns. They criticize you, they're distant, you feel like you're walking on eggshells again. And you go and you work really hard to try and get back that good version. You keep putting the pennies in the slot. You try harder, you add more money, you manage their reactions more carefully, thinking, I'll get it right. The next penny will be the one that wins. And each time you do it, you are shrinking yourself a little bit more. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. But when it does, and that warmth comes back, wow, that relief, that feeling of connection again, it releases all of the fear and tension. And it doesn't just feel good, it feels amazing. Because, well, you've been waiting for it and your nervous system has been primed for it. And that is how intermittent reinforcement operates inside a narcissistic relationship. And it is one of the most powerful psychological hooks that exists. It is part of the trauma bond. So let's look at why your brain gets addicted. And here's why it matters. It's so important that you don't blame yourself. When you receive love and warmth after a period of fear or withdrawal, your brain releases a chemical called dopamine. And this is the same neurochemical involved in other compulsive cycles, such as heroin addiction. And there's actually been studies on the brain that shows it is the exact same parts of the brain that are activated as when someone takes a hit of a drug. It's not just a pleasure response. It's actually more connected to seeking and anticipation than it is to satisfaction. And so it's the unpredictability, that not knowing when the good version will return. That's what keeps your dopamine system constantly activated, waiting, scanning, hoping. And so when it does finally come, that hit of dopamine is heightened by the relief. And research has shown that this kind of conditioning, using intermittent reinforcement, it actually creates stronger behavioral patterns than consistent reward. The brain doesn't just want this relationship, it's become wired around it. And that's why it's so hard to leave. It's nothing to do with being weak or anything to do with a problem within you, or that you're in some way trying to punish yourself or hurt yourself or you hate yourself. It's because your nervous system has been trained, often over years, maybe even back to childhood, to attach survival level significance to the moment of connection. So walking away doesn't just feel like leaving them. It feels like cutting off your own oxygen supply. And I'm not being dramatic here. This is backed by neuroscience. But let's throw in the shame layer. This doesn't get talked about anywhere near enough. Most people who have lived inside intermittent reinforcement, they don't just feel confused when it ends. They feel ashamed. Ashamed that they stayed. Ashamed that they kept going back. Ashamed that even now, even knowing what they know, part of them might still miss them. But actually not them, it. They don't necessarily miss the person, but they miss that dopamine hit. But obviously they place it on that person, or at least a version of the person that they occasionally got to experience. And that shame as well can keep you stuck longer because you're trying to avoid it. You can't make sense of it. You can't explain it. So it's easier to think that there's something wrong with you, and then we avoid it. So I want you to hear this really clearly now. Your response to intermittent reinforcement was absolutely normal in a very abnormal situation. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because your brain was doing exactly what brains do when they've been conditioned through unpredictable reward. You stayed because sometimes it was genuinely good and you held on to that. You stayed because leaving felt physiologically like a threat to your safety. So shame is part of that dynamic, but it's not yours. And this is really where therapy can help the most, because it's about untangling. You need that support to pull this apart, to basically separate yourself from what happened. So the first thing that therapy can do is just help you to name it. Having a framework, a name, an explanation for what happened, it can be really transformative. It moves you out of there's something wrong with me into I was conditioned. And that is a huge shift. And it's the beginning of self-compassion. And a good therapist, like my team are, they can help you map the exact cycle that you were living inside. The tension build, the incident or withdrawal, that beautiful reconciliation, and then the calm, then the build up with the tension, and seeing it all laid out like that as a pattern rather than random events, well, it loosens its grip on you. The second thing that therapy addresses is your nervous system. Because this isn't just a thinking problem. This is a somatic problem. This is in your brain, this is in your body, in your cells, and in your nervous system. Therapy can help you understand intermittent reinforcement intellectually, but you can still feel the pull, the longing, the anxiety. So approaches like somatic therapy, we use rewind, and trauma-focused work can help you to regulate the nervous system and begin to complete the stress response cycle that got frozen during that relationship. And this isn't about talking you out of your feelings, but it is about helping your body to start to feel safe again. Therapy helps you to explore the roots. Where did this come from? Where did this almost addiction come from? It doesn't just start overnight, and it rarely actually starts in these relationships. For many people, it's a pattern of love that has sometimes been warm, sometimes withdrawn, sometimes close, sometimes frightening. And actually, this starts much earlier. It can start in that caregiving environment where love felt conditional, where safety was unpredictable, and where you learned to work hard to earn connection. When a therapist helps you to see this, it's not about blame, it's not about blaming your parents, but it is about understanding. Because when you can see this particular dynamic that felt so familiar, so known, so normal, the work becomes about building a new template. Not blaming, not anger, although that's fine if they exist, but learning slowly and experientially that safety doesn't have to be earned, and that you don't have to manage someone else's emotions to stay connected, and that love can be consistent. And in the fourth part of how therapy can help is helping you work through the grief, the natural grief that occurs at the end of any relationship. Now, just because that relationship wasn't what you wanted it to be, what you hoped it would be, what you thought it was, doesn't mean that you're not going to grieve it. And that in and of itself can feel very strange. But the reason it's so painful is part of that intermittent reinforcement cycle, because you're grieving the version of the person who existed in the good moments. You're grieving the relationship you were promised, the future that was dangled and then withdrawn. And that grief is real, and it absolutely deserves a space. That doesn't mean you should have stayed, and it certainly doesn't mean that you're missing the relationship. It just means that it mattered to you, and that's wonderful. Relationships should matter. The fact that you were used in that relationship, that's harm, and that's what you're recovering from. Grief is normal and natural, and therapy can help you understand that. So what recovery actually looks like? Oh, I'm going to be honest, I've been on this journey for a long time, and it is not linear. There will be good days where you feel clear, you feel grounded, and then there will be days where, boom, you're right back in it. It might be a song that you hear, or a memory pops up, an argument, a smell, or even just the longing for them, and boom, you're hit by grief. This isn't a setback. That's actually what healing looks like. It's your system processing. It's coming out. It has to come out. So over time, and with the right support, what tends to happen is that pull, it just starts to become more quiet. The thoughts become less intrusive. The body stops bracing. And you start to notice when something feels safe rather than just familiar. And you begin to trust that distinction. You start to want different things. You start to want steadiness. You want reciprocity. You want relationships where you don't have to second guess yourself into exhaustion. And it is possible. It's not an abstract idea, but a lived reality. It's going to take time and support, but it's absolutely 100% worth it. So as I finish off, if anything that you've described today resonates with you, you don't have to carry this alone. Working through the effects of intermittent reinforcement, that conditioning and those nervous system patterns and the grief, it's exactly what we support at the Nurturing Coach. My team have worked through with thousands of people through this exact process. And the link to book a session with them is in the description and in the bio. You can also find more content on these patterns of narcissistic abuse recovery and what healing actually looks like on the website. If you found this video helpful, please do share it with someone else that might need to hear it, because so many are living inside of this and telling themselves there's something wrong with them. But there isn't. There really isn't. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.